Everyone's very quiet now that we're being recorded.
Dorte, just one quick thing. As soon as you do the welcome, when you introduce me, if you could advance the slide without me saying something to the first one, the vision. Thank you.
I can no longer see if people are logging in. Just wanted you to know.
Dorte, we have about 20 people that have already joined us. Hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone, and good afternoon. It's 4 o'clock and time for our 2023 annual review meeting. I wanted to welcome everybody to this meeting for APNM and APV. I'm Dorte, the Chief Development Officer for the organization, and I wanted to thank you for being here with us today and for your support of animals in New Mexico. Without you, our continued fight to make humane the new normal in New Mexico would not even be possible. And although we may be on the other end of the pandemic, the issues and the threats animals are facing today don't seem to diminish. 2023 was yet another challenging year for both people and animals in New Mexico. And today we're here and very excited to share with you a year's worth of accomplishments and impact and provide you with a preview of what's in store for this year. Our Executive Director, Lisa Jennings, along with several staff members, will talk about what 2023 looked like for APNM and APV and what's in store for this year, followed by a question and answer session after the presentation. And just as a quick reminder, please type your questions straight into the question and answer function, which is located at the bottom of your screen. And that way your questions will not get lost. And we will do our best to address everything either in writing or at the end by speaking. So now I'm just super excited to get us started, and we'll turn it over to our Executive Director, Lisa Jennings. Here you go, Lisa.
Thank you, Dorte. And welcome everyone to our 2023 annual review for both Animal Protection New Mexico and Animal Protection voters. We're really excited to have you with us and to share in our review of our accomplishments from last year. Of course, all because of your support and all because of all of the things you do out in the community. It's not lost on us that we're not in this alone. Many of you listening tonight are doing things on your own in your community to complement the work that we do as a staff here at APNM and APV. So thank you so much for what you do to support us and what you do in your own right in your communities. As you might have seen if you've attended these reviews in the past, we like to start with kind of the foundation for what our work is and how we do the work. We start with our vision, which is making humane the new normal around the state. So a lot of the things we see that we like don't get normalized just by us being used to them happening in front of us. We want to make sure that those things slowly go away because of all of our efforts. So our vision, making humane the new normal is really the foundation of all of our work. The next thing that I like to remind you all of is our mission, which is systemic change for animals. So we're looking at the systems and the causes, the root causes of the things that happen to animals that we don't like, and we're working to change those systems, and not just trying to work on things one animal at a time. Although sometimes working one animal at a time leads us to systemic change. And then finally, just an explanation of what our operational focus is. It's two things, it's impact and it's sustainability. And we look at those two things because it's really important to make an impact year to year, day to day, month to month, but it's also important to sustain those works that we do, and to make sure that it lasts, that it's enduring for animals. The next slide, please. Another thing I always like to share is a reminder that APNM and APV work together and in complement with one another to make all of the great changes that you help support year after year. A lot of our work at APNM and APV, they just go hand in hand. And so APV is our umbrella under which we do all of our lobbying. Many of you already know that. And then APNM is the aspect of that partnership that works on making sure that things get implemented correctly. We can do research in advance to make the policy making successful. And the great thing about APV's part in this is that APV can get involved in electioneering, and we can help get people elected to offices so that they can pass strong laws for the animals and for those who care about them. Next slide. All right, so I'm going to be sharing 2 slides with you. Well, more than 2, but the bulk of what I'm going to be sharing with you as a summary is a sneak peek for what you're going to be hearing from the rest of our staff. We have a really exciting presentation for you tonight, and I'm just going to fly through some of these highlights really quickly so you can join me in anticipation of some of the details that you'll hear from our program staff later on tonight. I want to start by just recognizing the superpowers of all of our staff, not just those who are on this call this afternoon and this evening, but everyone behind the work that happens every day in our organizations. This is not easy work. Those of you who've been involved in this work for a long time know that it takes a lot to keep doing this all the time. And so I want to just acknowledge the resilience, the adaptability, the leadership, and the desire to make positive change that all of our staff bring to this work. And I know that most of, if not all of you who are involved in this work recognize those characteristics are really important to success. We have a lot of departments that have to work together, and we're just very proud of everyone in our organization, support staff as well as program staff, who make this work possible. So tonight you're going to be hearing about some legislative successes. Our very own Jessica Shelton is going to be the first person you'll hear from next. She's going to be sharing some of the successes from 2023 session, and then later on in the program, you'll hear at the very end about the most recent 2024 sneak peek. But in 2023, you'll hear about some state funding that we were able to secure, and then a couple of policy bills that were really important for us to get passed. Jessica will be sharing that. You'll be hearing about program development and growth and planning. One of the luxuries we have now is to be able to do a lot of planning so that in subsequent years, leading to that sustainability aspect that I mentioned that's so important, all of those things put together lead to strong outcomes for the animals and the people who care about them. So you'll be hearing about updates on humane education, our plant-based eating program, and the chimps campaign that many of you have been following for literally decades, we know. In 2023, we've been able to really ratchet up our outreach into communities. We have such a strong and deep engagement with communities all over this big state. We are especially working more on engagement and partnerships with tribal nations. We have some great news to share about that. just massive community engagement across all of our programs. And then also we were able to accomplish some great wildlife coexistence education and outreach last year. And then lastly, on the impact slide, services and support. These services are an important aspect for us for bridging gaps in for needs in communities all over the state, and that we hope eventually can become institutionalized in New Mexico. And these services span all kinds of animals. We're talking about help for equines, both domestic and free roaming, for survivors of domestic violence, for some important community partnership projects we have in various communities around the state, our plant-based meal support, and then also animal control officer training. And then you'll also be hearing about really wonderful work that we did starting last year to launch a special co-sheltering initiative out of our CARE domestic violence support program services. So really rich content here. You'll get to hear some details later. Next slide, please. I wanted to share this testimonial that we got from one of our supporters, Nancy Adam, recently. I just thought it captured so nicely. It was such a nice compliment. And again, to acknowledge that this work wouldn't be possible, as Dorte said, without everyone on this call and beyond believing in our work and helping us succeed. The work, she said, the work you do is extraordinary, which is what our state needs, and you get results from your hard work and perseverance. Thank goodness you have the dedicated staff you do. Best wishes for a terrific year. So we thank Nancy for that acknowledgement, and also again, thank all of you and all of our supporters beyond this call who really make all of this work possible. Next slide, please. All right, well, the last slide I'd like to cover is, again, that second pillar of what we do, impact and sustainability. These are the things that we do, and these are just the highlights of things that we do to make sure that we can keep doing this work as long as it's needed. The first one is we've really, we're totally committed to strategic planning, and we went through a lot of planning last year. We still haven't completed our newest 5-year plan, but we are well along the way to getting that fleshed out. And we have a new focus now on strategic state infrastructure. So you'll start hearing about that terminology a lot. And that is making sure that the state of New Mexico is investing dollars and infrastructure. So systems, and the one you'll be hearing about the most is trying to work on a state Department of Animal Protection. You'll hear more about that from Jessica. We have implemented last year and going forward even more internal organizational structural changes to support that long-term systemic change. So you'll be hearing more about these strategic state infrastructure needs throughout this presentation and probably for the next many years. I wanted to highlight as one of our top achievements for sustainability that we have, we poll our donors and we ask, how are we doing? And how are we doing with communication with you? And we find that we have a very high donor satisfaction with our interaction with donors. And that leads to our donors staying with us and continuing to support us. And so that's called donor retention. And we're very proud of our ability to do that, because we need your support ongoing over years to make these changes happen. We've worked hard to make sure that we get more sources of income from various places, that we don't just rely on the same people over and over. And we've made some really meaningful headway with that in 2023. We're very proud of the fact that your donor dollars are very carefully stewarded by our finance staff and by our other staff. And so we have for 10 years in a row now an unmodified audit of our financial statements. And that means that our donors can rely on the financial information that we disclose and know that it's top notch. We are continuing our commitment to what's called DEIB, which is diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. We want to make our workplace a place where everyone feels like they belong. And we know that that will lead to better outcomes for the work that we do. And so that will be a long-term continued emphasis and commitment for our organization. We also always, and now just even, last year and going forward, we have continuous internal process improvement. So we know that our organization relies on good communication, good systems internally, not just the external systems for animals, but we want to be efficient in using your dollars, and we don't want to waste time. We want to clearly communicate. So our staff is always looking at how can we do a better job internally for our donors so that we can spend more time on our mission. And then lastly, on sustainability, I'm proud to say that our development staff worked hard last year to earn the organization a Charity Navigator 4-star rating. And we have been at a platinum level rating for our Candid charity rating system. So these are external ratings that look at all of our systems and our outcomes, and it's a way for people to sort of measure our effectiveness against other nonprofits. So all of that is to say we've got a great lineup for you tonight. And again, thank you for participating. We really appreciate that you take the time to spend a couple of hours with us to hear about what we did last year. And now I am going to turn it over to Jessica Shelton, who is our Chief Government Affairs Officer, and she's going to talk about all of our government affairs achievements. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much, Lisa. And thank you again, everyone, for joining us tonight. It's so wonderful to see all the names of the folks across the state who care about protecting animals and investing your time and energy into this work. We appreciate you so much. So I am thrilled to be able to share with you our big accomplishments and takeaways that came out of our government affairs department last year. In government affairs, we focus on developing and passing new laws to protect animals and to establish animal protection infrastructure. But we are also looking at how are those laws enforced. We are educating people about the laws, and we are also doing work to defend the laws once they are passed and to ensure that they're properly implemented. So the work is vast, but I'll start with just reviewing the 2023 state legislative session. Our state legislature met last year from January to March, 60 days. And there is so much work that happens behind the scenes and throughout the rest of the year leading up to that legislative session. And so I just want to acknowledge everyone on our staff and all of the grassroots supporters out there who have been a part of these victories that you're seeing on the screen right now, including in the photo. Those are some of the attendees, both human and canine attendees of our Animal Protection Lobby Day at the state capitol last year, where everyone was able to make their presence known in the Capitol building in support of some of these animal protection measures being considered. And one of the biggest victories last year was the passage of Senate Bill 215, which made New Mexico at last the second to last state in the country to make sexual abuse of animals a crime. And so this was, of course, as you can imagine, a difficult issue to work on, but a very important one. And we were really grateful and relieved that by and large, legislators in our legislature really took this issue as seriously as it needed to be taken, not just for the animals that are victimized by these crimes, but also because of other related crimes that are often happening in the exact same situation. So Senate Bill 215 made sexual abuse of an animal, as well as promoting sexual abuse of an animal, which includes, for example, coercing another individual, or purchasing or selling an animal for this purpose, Those are now 4th-degree felony crimes in our state. They are upgraded to 3rd-degree felonies if a child is involved. I am pleased to share with you all, if you haven't already heard, that last February, what is that? Okay, that was last month. We learned of the first known charge of bestiality in New Mexico since the passage of this law. So we're glad to see that this is being put into action. It looks like a very serious case where there was also some illegal activity involving children as well. So there you go, a perfect example of the link between animal abuse and other types of human violence and abuse. We're really glad that this law is finally on the books and making a difference. We also succeeded in passing Senate Bill 271, which is legislation that created a right of first refusal for our state's equine shelters. So those nonprofit organizations that are out there saving the lives of homeless and abused horses, donkeys, and mules. Prior to the passage of this law, if they wanted to help save the life of an equine that was in the custody of the government, they had to bid on that animal in an auction. And so that's just unnecessary time and expenses that they needed to spend at the outset before they even had the animal in their care. And also sometimes they would be outbid by another individual. And so, you know, the auction process really puts these animals' lives back at risk. And we wanted to ensure that there was a shelter safety net in our state, just the same way that we have a shelter safety net for homeless and abused dogs and cats. So with the passage of this bill, it is now law that stray equines, equines seized from cruelty cases, for example, these animals will be able to be offered to our nonprofit equine shelters first before going to auction. And so those organizations have been able to save a lot of those lives already. We also succeeded in securing some state funding for some programs, some additional funding for those equine shelters and rescues, and also some funding to continue the work of programs like APNM's own CARE program, which provides emergency services and housing program assistance to domestic violence survivors and their companion animals. Of course, as Lisa mentioned, and you're going to hear more of this later tonight, that there's also been an additional approach in how we are doing this care work, looking at co-sheltering and emphasis on co-sheltering, which is really exciting. And so this funding has been able to apply to that, and it's already producing really great progress. We also supported some other legislation, House Bill 384, which among other things, just provided a little bit of a process for expediting licensure for veterinarians coming into New Mexico and wanting to practice here. And Senate Bill 72, which created the Wildlife Corridors Fund, which is a state fund that is now administered by the Department of Transportation, and it works on wildlife corridor projects in order to facilitate the movement of our state's wildlife and also trying to reduce conflicts and vehicle collisions. So that's really great, not only for our wildlife, but also for those of us driving on those roads. The legislature also appropriated $5 million to go into that Wildlife Corridors Fund, and approximately $3 million for animal shelter construction and improvements in certain parts of the state. Next slide. So we also have our APNM Animal Cruelty Helpline. And as you can see from this chart, which spans across approximately 6 years, going on 6 years, you can see that there was certainly a spike during the COVID-19 pandemic in the number of calls that we were getting, and that that was similar to, from what we were seeing and hearing across all of the different helplines and hotlines in our own organization, in the state, in the country. It was kind of a common phenomenon. And so we're seeing the call numbers come down to those pre-pandemic levels, but it is still a large number of calls that are coming in for our staff to field and not only direct people to the appropriate legal authorities in order to make sure that those reports are seen by law enforcement, but also following those cases through and trying to support strong investigations, strong prosecution, strong sentencing as those cases move through our legal system. So last year, there were 511 calls that came in total for the year. Almost half of them have to do with dog abuse and neglect. You can see from the green line, the number of rewards issued over the past few years has dropped down to 0 or near 0. Back in the heyday of our cruelty crime rewards program, where we were issuing rewards for tips that assisted animal cruelty investigations, there was a lot more uptake of our offers. And that was, I want to say, I mean, Lisa could probably confirm 1-2 decades ago. These days, everyone's probably heard of Crime Stoppers, and most, if not all, of our law enforcement agencies really work with Crime Stoppers to utilize rewards. And so one of the things that we did do last year was to go ahead and officially retire our crime tips rewards program so that we could dedicate those resources to other areas of infrastructure that still need additional support, that those gaps aren't being filled by someone else right now. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we also focus on not just passing animal protection laws, but also the enforcement and implementation of those laws. So we focus a lot on educating our animal control and law enforcement officers in our state. And we do that a couple of different ways. One is just direct trainings and presentations. And so last year, just a couple of highlights of what we were able to do. We partnered with the national organization, the Humane Society of the United States, on an animal cruelty investigations training on Isleta Pueblo. There were over 60 officers that came from over 10 different tribal communities across the state. And District Attorney Sam Bregman from Bernalillo County also joined us there. And so that was an important opportunity for a lot of officers across the state to learn about animal laws and the link between cruelty and other types of crimes and violence. The other way that we tackle this is through training scholarships. So there are entities out there that have specific animal control training programs, and you can get certificates from that. And so one of the things that we're able to do is offer scholarships to officers in order to go ahead and take that training, because that's something that's so important for the individuals that are performing this work in our communities. But it may not always, there may not always be funding available, or maybe this just isn't the priority for the use of funding in our law enforcement agencies and in our municipalities. And so this is an opportunity for us to say, you know what, if that's the obstacle, here, we can provide you some funding. And so 34 officers received 68 scholarships so that they were able, looks like all of them were able to take multiple courses with our scholarship support. On the left side, you can see some photos of a couple of the training scholarship recipients. Officer Tashina Bernal from Santa Clara Pueblo, Officer Mark Webb from Albuquerque Animal Welfare Department. Just two great examples of folks who will be able to benefit from the training that they received. Next slide. So another part of our government affairs work is tribal affairs. And so, there's all different ways that different programs and initiatives in APNM work with tribal communities across the state, whether it's providing various services. We do a lot of equine protection work, a lot of other support. But one other specific area that we look at is where we can support tribal governments in improving and implementing their own animal control and animal protection laws. And so thank you, Dorothea, just a few examples that are going to pop up on the screen of the different types of work that we've been able to do with our tribal affairs manager, Ruben Lucero, helping us. And it's everywhere from Taos Pueblo to Isleta to Jemez to Navajo Nation, where we are providing key resources. We're donating food. We're giving them consultation on how to, maybe some model ordinance language that they can look at as they're revising their own ordinances. And so I just wanted to share some of these examples of how we are working in all of these different areas to really assist these tribal governments in doing what they want to do in terms of protecting animals, but maybe they just haven't received the right resources, or maybe they just need some help with some specific information that we can give them. So we're really proud of the work that Ruben's been able to do. Some other examples. Oh, no, that's good. That's good, Dorothea. Thank you. Next slide. Some other examples of the education and outreach that we have been able to do throughout 2023. On the left side, you'll see we had a presence at the New Mexico Humane Conference, which is hosted by Animal Humane New Mexico. Pictured down below, our Cruelty Response and Advocacy Director, Alan Edmonds, gave a great presentation to advocates, but also a lot of municipal and county shelter and animal control staff about various local and state animal laws and tips on building coalitions in order to develop laws and implement laws. In the upper right, you'll see one of the great things that I got to do along with Ruben was to volunteer at a City of Albuquerque spay neuter clinic as post-surgery recovery volunteers, which was really great because we do so much work working on policies and government funding to support spay neuter in our state, and it was really great to see those dollars in action. And dozens and dozens of families received assistance from that spay neuter clinic on that day. The bottom right, you'll see that you can see tiny me behind the podium. I was able to present at the New Mexico conference on the link, which was hosted by a New Mexico organization called Positive Links that focuses on the link between animal abuse and human abuse and domestic abuse. And so I was able to talk about and tell the story of the passage of our anti-bestiality law, newly passed, and also share a little bit about the legislative process so that more and more people can get involved in legislative work as we are fighting for more animal protection laws and infrastructure. Next slide. So another great highlight from last year was partnering with the national organization, the ASPCA, on a full-day animal cruelty prosecution training. So this was a training targeted to our state's district attorneys and other prosecutors and other legal professionals. And it talked about everything from investigating animal cruelty crimes to how do you manage evidence, how to manage necropsies, how to look at negotiating sentencing, all of these different components of prosecuting and making a strong case when you are implementing animal cruelty laws. It was really great information that was shared, and we were really thrilled that partners in this work and they attended and sent their own staff were district attorneys Mary Carmack Altwies, from the 1st Judicial District in the Santa Fe area, and then District Attorney Tom Clayton from the 4th Judicial District, which is in the Las Vegas area. We also attended a legislative dinner hosted by the New Mexico Speaker of the House, used that as an opportunity to talk with more policymakers about all of the issues that we are working on. And then in the upper right, you'll see a photo of presenting before the Water and Natural Resources Legislative Interim Committee, sharing information about a few different issues: spay-neuter funding, equine rescue funding, and also talking about the veterinary service shortage as it has been felt in New Mexico, and talking about some of the potential solutions that policymakers and communities can look at to try to address some of those challenges in folks accessing and veterinary services for their animals. Next slide. Okay, and finally, I just wanted to give a quick update on a couple of lawsuits that have been filed challenging previous animal protection laws that have been passed. And so many of you may already be familiar with these, but I just wanted to provide some 2023 updates. So as you may recall, in 2020, we supported by so many of you and a huge coalition of supporting organizations and counties and cities succeeded in passing Senate Bill 57, which created a new spay-neuter funding mechanism for the statewide spay-neuter program that is administered by the New Mexico Board of Veterinary Medicine. Other funds come from our state license plate. There's a spay-neuter license plate, and there's also a tax checkoff donation option on the Pit D form when you file your taxes. Quick plug for that: if you haven't done your taxes yet this year, you can grab that Pit D form and donate some or all of your state refund toward the spay-neuter program. But unfortunately, shortly after the law was passed, the pet food industry and a few other co-plaintiffs filed lawsuit against the state, and they are attempting to overturn the law and trying to get a judge to rule that the law is unconstitutional, which is, to be honest, what we commonly see from those who disagree with animal protection laws and different approaches to establish animal protection infrastructure. So it wasn't a complete surprise, but certainly a disappointment. And over the past few years, that case has continued to sort of languish in the courts. It was started in state court, and then it got moved to federal court, and then it got bumped back over to state court. And in 2023, some of the updates were that the state, once it was back in state court, the state filed a motion to dismiss the case. And then in November, the judge denied that state's motion to dismiss largely. And so now the case continues. So no one has lost anything yet. The case is starting on the merits, and we're expecting that there will still be probably a significant amount of time before we see any resolution to this. And in the meantime, we have other parts of our organization that are looking at what is happening with the funding that is already collected and trying to work with the Board of Veterinary Medicine to try to get those dollars out the door. We have so many communities that are really desperate for more spay-neuter funding and support. So we're hoping to see more movement on that later this year. Additionally, you may also recall in 2021, we succeeded in passing Senate Bill 32, known as Roxy's Law. That was the law that restricted traps, snares, and poisons on public lands. Again, opposition group disagrees with that policy. pro-trapping organizations have sued the state to try to overturn the law. So that lawsuit was filed in just May of last year. And so it's still really early days in this litigation. The state has gone ahead and filed a motion to dismiss the lawsuit, which we of course support. And we've, have worked closely with the Attorney General's office, now known as the Department of Justice, attorneys that are working on the case and representing the state in defending Roxy's Law. So again, that's still very much in progress. I'm sure we're not going to see a resolution to that anytime soon as well. But in the meantime, the law is still in full effect. So traps, snares, and poisons do continue to be banned on public lands, with few exceptions. So that is my summary. And so the next thing that I want to do is introduce and hand the slides over to Judy Wolf, who is one of our newer team members, joined us last year. She is the Chief Humane Communities Officer and is already doing amazing work with her amazing team on so many great programs and initiatives. So I'll hand it off to Judy, and thank you all.
Hey everyone, my name is Judy Wolf, and like Jessica said, I am the new Chief Humane Communities Officer, and I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really excited to be presenting about our work that was done in 2023. So my department is the Humane Communities Department, and it was formerly known as the Program Services Department. We've had a few changes to kind of do some of the structural work that Lisa was talking about at the beginning of the presentation. So this department now oversees education and outreach, which includes our plant-based eating program. And then we also oversee the community partnerships in several of our counties, our domestic violence care program and co-sheltering services, and our cafe companion animal food support program. So we've got a lot going on, and we've got a fantastic team. I'm going to start by talking about our achievements for education, though, in 2023. So our education program is called the Animal Connection, and it consists of 12 virtual humane education lessons in the classroom. We have a 3-lesson person component, hybrid component for those schools within a 100-mile radius. And that means that schools that fit within those parameters, they can have our amazing senior humane educator, Sherry Mangold, come into the classroom with a dog for 3 of the classes. And it has just proved to be tremendous for the children. They absolutely love it and create these animal connections that they just haven't had before. So our program has seen considerable growth in 2023. And a lot of this came from returning schools who are sharing the curriculum with new students, which means that they found the previous years to be so successful, they want to add more classrooms, which is just fantastic. And we also have a lot of word of mouth interest from teachers across New Mexico. So we're talking, teachers picking up the phone and calling each other and saying, hey, have you heard about this fantastic program? And many of those are in areas that have a really high need. This year, we also focused on increasing our collaboration with local organizations and community leaders. And what that means is that encourages teachers to make community connections and bring them into the classroom. For example, they might bring in an animal community officer or control officer into the classroom to kind of talk about what their job is and how they work with the community and with animals. And this really integrates the community into the work that the schools are doing and that the Animal Connection is doing as well. We also, listened to feedback from our teachers, and it was really exciting. We are now partnering with Red Rover to provide Kind News. It's a humane education magazine for kids. And if you're from my generation, just think about Ranger Rick. And if any of you ever had Ranger Rick, it's just a fun magazine with lots of learning and games and activities. And so this is really great that we're able to offer this to the kids. We also did a lot of pilot launches in several regions in the state, including San Miguel, Rio Arriba, and Cibola counties, along with community projects in schools located in Albuquerque, Espanola, Grants, and Las Vegas. And one of our projects included students making toys for shelter dogs. This was actually covered by KOB TV. You can see the photo on the top left slide right here. And it's a great way for students to show their kindness to animals. You know, one of the goals in humane education is to build empathy and compassion for animals among children, but that also spreads to their relationships with each other and with other individuals and people in their communities. And so having the children make toys for the animals and draw that connection of empathy and then pull that into their own lives is really amazing. And then in another project that was done in Las Vegas, the education team partnered with Animal Welfare Coalition of Northeastern New Mexico and Friends of San Miguel County Animals to support elementary schools using their virtual program. And you can see that photo in the bottom of the slide as well. And again, just look at these happy kids engaging in these amazing projects and just really enjoying. So overall in 2023, the Animal Connection curricula served 915 students, 21 teachers, and 57 classrooms. And we think that that's just pretty extraordinary work. In addition to the Animal Connection, we also do in-person and special community presentations. And this included full in-person programs at Bernalillo County Youth Center and Vision Quest Mid-Schools, and an additional 7 presentations that were delivered to students and adults, including a Rekindle the Spirit conference at Isleta Pueblo for New Mexico tribal youth, and a presentation at Montezuma Elementary for students with emotional needs. And again, when we look at our target audience, some of the groups that we're working with just have such an intense need for some type of connection. And this animal connection, this animal bond can prove really strong. And again, they can bring that into other places in their lives. So Sherry was able to, our senior humane educator, was able to give these special presentations to 301 students in 25 classrooms. So you can see this program alone reached over 1,200 people in 2023. Just a great successful year. And if you can move to the next slide, Dorte, we can look at a quick testimonial. So one of our teachers from Bernalillo Elementary, she says, "I thank you for the Animal Connection at our school. Students are so happy and excited about the program that parents tell me that their children want to take the responsibility of grooming their dogs and cats." And then on the left side, you can see just, you know, some really neat letters and art activity that the children have done. And then on the right side, which I think is really fun, you can see dog-shaped pet containers that the students made. So that is a great program, and we are just really thankful for our team who is doing such an amazing job. And if we can move to the next slide. So now we have our plant-based eating, and it was also a really exciting year with multiple collaborations. One of the things we did was collaborated with MoGrow Mobile Grocery and Eat the Change, where we worked together to provide Rama Navajo chapter with 800 culturally appropriate plant-based meals. Along the same lines, we were able to support spay-neuter clinics in rural New Mexico with 160 plant-based meals in partnership with Animal Welfare Coalition of Northeastern New Mexico and Animal Balance. And these efforts of sharing plant-based foods within community and with community leaders and influencers, it's like key. It's a key way for us to reach New Mexico and introduce healthy plant-based foods. You know, the fact that the food is culturally appropriate is like significant. It helps us spread our message that plant-based eating is an option for everyone. No matter what your regular diet or no matter where you are, if we can provide those foods, we can help spread the word on plant-based eating. At the same time, we're extremely excited to announce that the plant-based program has a new plant-based education program manager. we're lucky to have Antonio Maestes with us, and he will be reimagining the plant-based education program. His goal is to continue building spaces that make quality plant-based foods more accessible in New Mexico in a culturally contextualized way. So again, our goal is to reach across culture in New Mexico and show that it is possible to have a plant-based diet and still be who you are without feeling pressure of making these radical changes that don't fit with you. He is also establishing new partnerships with Vegan Outreach. He's collaborating on the statewide Vegan Chef Challenge, and he began a new podcast entitled Culturally Vegan. I really encourage you to listen to the podcast, and I think the link will be shared in the chat with everyone. Finally, we're excited to report that all this hard work in 2023 helped us to secure $100,000 in future funding for 2024. This funding is going to advance the great plant-based education work that Antonio is focusing on, and it will also allow us to address animal agriculture and its impact on animals and the environment. Next slide, please. So our community partnership program is our work in the various counties in New Mexico State. We also have a new leader here, Daniel Macy, who started in December. And under community partnerships, our work focuses on spay, neuter, vet care, transport programs, which basically means we take animals from one location to another location, sometimes in state, oftentimes out of state, where they have a better chance of being in a shelter or being adopted. In McKinley County, in 2023, we collaborated with Bro and Tracy Animal Welfare with funding from the Valerie C. King Fund, and were able to assist 900 animals. Their work provided spay and neuter clinics, donated pet food, transport, foster home support, and medical support for animals in the Pine Hill, Rama Navajo communities. So 993 is a number that we were very proud of this year, in addition to the 900. That's a huge impact again in one county. In Mora County, we continued partnership with Las Vegas San Miguel Veterinary Hospital, where we were able to support 150 spay and neuter surgeries and 90 vaccines for clients in 11 Mora County municipalities. And finally, in Santa Rosa, we provided general support for 3 spay-neuter clinics, including help in scouting mobile clinics. We also assisted in collection of community cat colony background information, and that's always quite a phrase, community cat colony. I like the alliteration there. But we assisted with that background information and collaboration with the ACO director, Crystal Trujillo. So we look forward to continuing these programs in 2024. Next slide, please. And our CARE program, which stands for Companion Animal Rescue Efforts, provides animal care services to domestic violence victims. It was extraordinarily successful in 2023. And this program ensures that animals of domestic violence survivors are either placed in the shelter with the survivor, which is called co-sheltering, or they are housed safely in a boarding facility. Throughout the year, we provided uninterrupted helpline coverage, which is where we tend to have our first encounters with clients. In addition, we received brand new funds for a co-sheltering initiative that will assist domestic violence centers in setting up co-sheltering programs. So up until now, we've been offering a lot of assistance to help domestic violence survivors board their pets. But what we're really interested in is the movement of co-sheltering, where they can actually take their pets with them into the shelter. And so that is the grant that Jessica referred to earlier, the funding through CYFD. So we're really excited about that. And it allows us to work with various domestic violence centers and help them to set up their own co-sheltering programs. As part of that, we also conducted site visits to Roswell Refuge, Roberta's Place, COPE, and the Nest Domestic Violence Shelter. We also provided direct support to improve the co-sheltering procedures we were talking about through information, supplies, and case management to these and other domestic violence shelters in New Mexico. And finally, we partnered with Red Rover and set the date for the first annual New Mexico Co-Sheltering Conference. That was held, by the way, in March, and it was an absolutely fantastic conference. Overall, our care helpline, where all of our work begins, received 121 calls involving 203 animals. As a result of those calls, we provided agency referrals for 38 individuals for a variety of companion animal needs. In the end, we coordinated direct services for 46 mini grant recipients. And that means that 51 animals were provided routine medical care, 17 animals provided spay-neuter procedures, 5 animals received emergency vet care, and 80 animals were provided with up to 21 days of housing. As you'll see from our testimonial on the next slide, the care program is life-saving for domestic violence survivors. Next slide, please. So one of our clients says, I really appreciate all your help. My cats are the reason I survived 16 years of domestic violence. They were my only source of company. People don't understand how important pets are to domestic violence victims. Your program and help is invaluable. Thank you. And that is what we do the work for. And that is simply fantastic. And finally, in a new pilot project called Cafe, we were able to provide companion animal food effort support to 9 organizations and pueblos with food animal assistance grants for distribution in their communities. And you can see some of the 9 organizations there that we assisted. Next slide. So those funds helped us serve a total of more than 4,300 cats, dogs, chickens, kittens, puppies, companion chickens, and companion equines. This assistance served more than 1,300 households with 96,000 pounds of food distributed. This food is essential to communities. You know, a top reason companion animals are given to shelters is because of the financial circumstances of the household. So when we can provide food for these families, pet food, for their cats, dogs, kittens, puppies, chickens, and equines, we can keep the companion animals in the home. So we're extremely pleased with this project. Next slide. And as you can see from these testimonials, the food was very timely and appreciated. One of our Santa Rosa residents says free food for cats and dogs is a big help as dog food is very expensive. Not everyone has the means for that. Thank you for helping us. Crystal Trujillo from Santa Rosa says, Guadalupe County is the second poorest county. Because of the grant, we were able to help our community that is struggling financially. And finally, an elder of Taos Pueblo says, this food will help my family's budget. Buying dog food is a big expense and we are very appreciative. So we're extremely pleased with Cafe and we're very excited to continue it into 2024. And that concludes the work of Humane Communities. And I always want to thank such an excellent team that I'm working with that we are able to do such good work. For now, I'm going to pass it off to Nina Edelman, and she is our Chief Program and Policy Officer for Wildlife and Equine.
Thank you so much, Judy. And thank you everyone for joining us. You probably keep hearing us say that, but we're extremely grateful for your support and for your interest in our work. I am the Chief Program and Policy Officer of the Equine and Wildlife Programs. So I'm going to start with some things that happened in the equine program last year. Our equine program exists to help support a safety net for domestic, free-roaming, and wild horses to help them stay with their families through a financial or health or natural disaster crisis, to help provide gelding assistance to lessen the number of unwanted horses that are out there, and to help them have a dignified and humane death instead of potentially ending up in the slaughter pipeline. So it has been a really big year for the equine program. As you could see some of the numbers over here for the emergency feed assistance, we were able to help 1,514 equines. We're able to pay for the gelding of 51 equines, provide supporting veterinary care for 159 equines. And that is primarily through our mobile clinics and also help to the equine shelters. And with the Trails End, we were able to help 19 equines have a humane and compassionate end of the road. Overall, we helped approximately 1,743 equines and 1,019 people. This year or last year, we saw a number of expansions in our clinic initiative, including increasing the number of clinics, increasing offerings of clinics, and the geographical reach of our clinics. Last year saw our first clinic in southern New Mexico that was in Las Cruces, and 15 equines were gelded at that clinic. It had our first equine clinic in Arizona, Window Rock, which is the capital of the Navajo Nation. And while, of course, we are a New Mexico organization, we recognize that a lot of the partners we work with, such as the tribal communities, they cross state lines. And some of the work needs to be regional in order to be successful and to have an impact on New Mexico horses. This was also our first time offering an educational talk by a veterinarian at one of the clinics, as well as an engaged question and answer session with the community. And our first time offering hoof care services at one of the clinics that was in San Ysidro for the surrounding communities. We also provided assistance to 3 equine shelters, including Walking in Circles, Meslinger Rescue Foundation, and Dharma Horse. On the right there in the picture, that picture is from one of our clinics in the village of San Ysidro. And that is a stallion that was about to be gelded that day. As you could see, he was being a little agitated, but hopefully he's feeling better now. Next slide, please. And so all of the equine direct services help support the overall policy work for the equine program. And last year we saw enormous growth in our outreach to various tribal communities. Of course, many communities need equine services, but we have found that many tribal communities are usually in very remote locations with very limited access to veterinary care, and have on average more both geographic and financial barriers to really provide for that safety net for their equines. But pretty much without an exception, everyone we've met in those communities loves their equines like family, and really welcome the opportunity to have access to affordable vet care locally within their communities, instead of traveling sometimes hours and paying hundreds of dollars to get veterinary care in the big cities. This last winter in 2023, in February and January, we had a huge wave of feed assistance aid to 11 communities. You could see them listed there, several pueblos, one of the Apache nations, as well as several Navajo chapters, assisting 628 equines. And that was during a time when the hay prices were soaring during the winter. There was it was very hard to find affordable hay, if you found hay at all. So it was and there was no forage on the ground for horses to eat if they were let loose. So everybody was very grateful. We were actually invited by Nambe Pueblo's governor to attend their feast day, and our tribal affairs officer, Ruben Lucero, was able to attend that and help strengthen that relationship as well. We had a PZP training. PZP is a fertility control vaccine for mares, which can be used to help humanely manage wild equines right on the range. So they help prevent the mares from having babies. We trained 7 additional tribal members and 1 veterinarian to use that fertility control vaccine. And we received interest from the Navajo Nation, the Central Navajo Nation. I know some of you know that we've been working with the Rama Navajo chapter, and all of their natural resources staff is trained to use PZP on their horses. And now we've been working with the Central Navajo Nation with their veterinary program and with their feral horse program to help train their staff to use the PZP as well. And we've received interest from Zuni Animal Care Services to use PZP. So it's a very encouraging trend that we're very excited about and very happy to facilitate. Actually, this year, in a couple of weeks in April, we're sending 9 members of the Navajo Nation up to Montana to the Science and Conservation Center to be trained to use PZP. So below you see some of the clinics that we've had. We've had 2 seasonal clinics in Rama Navajo chapter where 109 equines were helped. Rock Springs Navajo chapter, that was our first educational talk. It was attended by at least 20 people from 9 different Navajo chapters, as well as Zuni Animal Care Services, and 20 equines received vaccinations. Window Rock, Arizona, 15 equines are provided care, including 6 mares that were treated with PZP. And actually that 1 veterinarian listed up there, he was trained to use PZP a week before, and then the following week he went up to Window Rock and helped PZP the mares. So that was actually the Navajo Nation teams that was administering the vaccines, which again is a really, really great, encouraging sign. We've strengthened our partnership with San Felipe Pueblo and are helping to support their longstanding stance against horse slaughter. Zia Pueblo, we held 2 clinics at the village of San Isidro, helping 28 equines, including castration of 11 stallions. And with Taos Pueblo, we assisted with veterinary care for 29 equines, and that included vaccinations, deworming, and castrations. For around the state, outside of tribal communities, like mentioned before, we had our Las Cruces gelding clinic that received a lot of media attention. It was well attended with 15 stallions, and 1 additional donkey was gelded following the clinic. We also participated in the New Mexico Livestock Board's Equine Shelter Rescue Fund Committee, which helps distribute the Equine Shelter Rescue Fund money to the licensed equine shelters. So we worked to equitably distribute $262,000 from the ESRF fund to the 12 licensed equine shelters that applied. And we are continuing to participate in the Carson Partnership for Horse Management, where the Forest Service, the local stakeholders like ranchers and local equine rescues are working together to on a plan to implement a plan to help manage the horse population in the Carson Forest with the PZP vaccine. And I know they're looking to work with BLM, who have adjacent land to the Forest Service to conduct an updated survey on the horse population there. And on the right there is one of the attendees at the Rama Navajo chapter equine clinic with his 2 horses. So next slide, please. Here are some testimonials from some recipients of our Equine Direct services. The first one is actually pictured in the photo you see right there. He's a feed recipient from Taos County with his pony pictured here on the right. He says that this is his first time asking for help. He could still love her. She needs him and he needs her. And that's really touching to me. So I wanted to include him, and that's a very, very touching photo there. And we have a feed recipient from McKinley County saying how it would help them out a lot. They're an older individual, but still want to care for their animals as long as they can. The animals keep them going, especially a donkey, and she's their old girl. And below there's a feed recipient from the Navajo, Baca Navajo chapter, who says, in our culture, to have an animal is a blessing. They attend to us with their strength, speed, and their beautiful body. So it's just wonderful, the the positive response we've had from so many tribal communities, and we look forward to working more, to partnering with more communities, and we feel very privileged that we have been greeted so warmly, and have had the opportunity to help where we could. So thank you. And now I'm gonna pass this over to Jean Grant, who is our Chief Program and Policy Officer, Protecting Animals in Science.
That's a tough act to follow. Thank you, Nina. There's a lot of good stuff there. Really appreciate it. Welcome to
Oh my
all.
gosh. Oh, I'm so sorry. I forgot. I have a second department. I'm so sorry, Jean.
Oh, it's okay. Please.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So promoting coexistence with wildlife. Gosh, yeah, the horse, there's a lot happened with horses. So yeah, we also had two big pushes this last year with wildlife. On the left here, that is actually a photo by Bandelier National Monument, and that is one of their little cougar adolescent cubs who got a hold of one of their trail cameras, and thankfully there was a second trail camera in position to take this very adorable picture. But unfortunately, it has not been a very good year for cougars. You'd think that after a 20-year drought, after our historic wildfires in 2022, and after the record heat waves we had last summer, that New Mexico Department of Game and Fish would give the wildlife a break, but that was not the case. They did propose a new bear and cougar rule that would govern the hunting of bears and cougars for the next 4 years. That rule proposed to raise the bear kill limits from 804 to 864, so that's a 60 bear increase, and to keep the cougar kill limits at an unsustainable 562, and only count legal kills towards these limits, which means that unlimited numbers of bears and cougars may be killed through other human causes, such as poaching, such as vehicle collisions, such as even so-called nuisance response, which results in a lot of animals being killed because humans often don't know what measures to take to non-lethally coexist with other species. And I've looked at some of the recent statistics, and just in the last few years, as many as 113 bears were killed in a single year on top of that kill limit, the legal hunting kill limit, and as many as 70 cougars were killed in 1 year on top of that kill limit. So to try to combat this terrible rule, we joined forces with Sierra Club and HSUS to submit extensive written public comments separately for bears and for cougars, each of them over 30 pages long, each thoroughly cited to the most current, best available science. We provided verbal testimony at the Game Commission hearings and engaged our supporters to do the same. We raised awareness through public media outlets. We did interviews with newspapers and had a TV spot interview. We wrote letters to the editor, and we encouraged others to write letters to the editor. We consulted with wildlife biologists, including one of the leading national experts in cougars, Dr. Ken Logan, who also testified against this rule at the Game Commission meetings. And we've had multiple conversations with both New Mexico Department of Game and Fish and the governor's office, trying to find ways to lower some of those really high kill limits. We asked for the kill limits to be lowered by 50%, and we asked for all human cause mortality to count towards those kill limits. And unfortunately, despite all of these efforts, the rule did pass as it was proposed. So while that is, very tragic and very disappointing for us, it just goes to show that we need real systemic and legislative change to really overcome some of the mindsets that exist in some of these agencies and on some of these commissions. And the outcome of this rule will help provide some fuel to that fire, to show why it is necessary to have more legislative solutions for these problems. We also partnered with with the city of Albuquerque on a wildlife coexistence initiative. And that's thanks to Counselor Tabby Feeblecorn, who secured a very generous $40,000 grant from the city. So APNM worked in partnership with the city, with Counselor Feeblecorn, with the departments to identify 10 key coexistence topics, which were coyotes, snakes, birds, pollinators, bears, prairie dogs, hiking safety, pesticides, rodenticides, and zoonotic diseases. And we provided information that was converted to web pages, and this is on the city website, all of this information. Web pages, printable brochures, social media posts to help Albuquerque residents protect vulnerable species and minimize conflict with wildlife. If you are from Albuquerque, you might remember some of the social media posts from last summer. We tried to do a geo-targeted campaign via Facebook and I believe Instagram to target everyone in the area and to let them know what to do if you see a snake, if you see a coyote, how to be a responsible hiker, all of those things. So we're really grateful to Councilor Feeblecorn and to the city of Albuquerque for the opportunity to work on this program. And we're hoping to use some of the information that was created from this to create more information that's more applicable statewide, so not just with Albuquerque. And now I'm done for real. So sorry. Jean, I hand it over to you.
Not a problem. I'm so honored to follow you. It was perfect. Thank you, Nina. I really appreciate it. Hey folks, welcome to all. Pleased to bring you our Protecting Animals in Science annual review. My name is Gene Grant. I'm the Chief Program and Policy Officer for Animals in Science here at APNM. And also on screen, you'll see here in just a little bit, Sadie Jacobs, Esquire. She is our Program Director for AIS. In a couple of minutes, Sadie's going to give you an overview of the legal front we've been fighting, notably for the release of the chimps at the Alamogordo Primate Facility on Haldeman Air Force Base. Now, before we get to what you're seeing on the screen there for dissection choice, real quick, we have three main issue areas in our department. Dissection choice for all students in New Mexico, our work to reduce the use of painful or fatal laboratory experiments in labs across New Mexico, and seeking sanctuary, as I mentioned, for the 26 remaining chimpanzees at APF. Let me start off with dissection choice. As you see there, it's an issue where APNM has a long history of success. And most recently in 2005, our work with the legislature resulted in the New Mexico Public Education Department adopting a policy that allows for dissection choice by students and parents. Now, our goal right now, what we started in 2023, is to work with the New Mexico Public Ed Department and making changes to that 2005 Board of Education policy. It's somewhat dated and that needs some work, but we're also pursuing three other key critical elements. The inclusion of notices in both the student and parent handbook for dissection. Now that includes an explanation of the rule, an opt-out form in the parent handbooks if students do not want to use animals in dissection, and importantly, a script for teachers to announce to classes at the beginning of the term that there is an option for dissection. We feel that's really important to have that happen as well. Now, part of our approach in getting to the screen was becoming more active in front of policymakers. You see Representative Tara Lujan there as I'm grinning nervously while she's holding one of our examples for dissection choice. We were going to be tabling at the New Mexico Science Teachers Association in the fall. It's a big snag for us. We're very excited about that. We're going to be tabling along with our partners at Animal Learn. Animal Learn is an arm of the American Anti-Vivisection Society based in Pennsylvania. Via Animal Learn rather, teachers as well as students and parents can borrow dissection choice alternatives for free and simply mail them back when they are finished with them. It's a great system. If you want to check out sciencebank.org, you can see the choices. It's really quite stunning. We also made strides in 2023 towards creating a policy committee comprising of current and retired biology teachers, administrators, parents, and relevant local elected officials to guide us on our approach a little bit here, especially when it comes to administrators and cost issues surrounding the use of animals for dissection. And if anybody here is perhaps a teacher or involved in education, you'd like to be involved, you can get in touch with me and we'd love to have you. We're still looking to expand that advisory group on dissection choice. Love to have you. Now, if there was ever a sign we are on the right track, that picture of the bottom, that is Lauren Apodaca. a Las Cruces biology teacher who received an honorable mention award from Animal Learn in 2023 for their fearless approach to using dissection choices in the classroom, which also earned them coverage in the Las Cruces Bulletin, a really nice piece of press coverage about dissection choice. We're really pleased with that. Now, to be clear, at bottom here, the environmental issues surrounding dissection choice inform our approach because with over 1 million frogs, just to take one animal, caught in the wild for use in our nation's schools, it's just not a good system that anybody really wants anymore. It's unnecessary and increasingly unwanted, and we aim to continue spreading that awareness. Next slide, please. Thank you, Dorte. Cute little beagle there, but regrettably, this is what happens in labs. There are 7 labs in New Mexico performing some manner of animal testing. That might be a surprise to most people. Some are associated with universities and schools, some are federal labs, and some are private. Now, for labs that are using animals, there are protocols and categories on animal use under the USDA. Now, we focus in our department on what's known as level E category. That's the letter E, level E category. That's the category where experiments are performed without regard for pain or distress to the animals involved. Now, as one might imagine, these facilities don't want the public to know exactly what is transpiring behind closed doors. So digging into funding sources, protocols, and the fines levied for abuse by federal agencies is challenging. We do so via Freedom of Information Act or FOIA requests, along with Inspection of Public Records Act or IPRA requests for state oversight. It's a process that does not move quickly by its nature. Many states have adopted transparency bills because of the secrecy, and we are considering similar for New Mexico in 2025. Now, in 2023, we saw the renewal of our work with Dr. Kavita Rajasakar. She reviews the protocols used at the University of New Mexico in their animal experiments. Now, having an MD on the team also brings a human connection in this very important way. It's looking at how these protocols are viewed in the context of human benefit or not, and that's important. We're glad we have Kavita on the team as well. Now, we continue to streamline that FOIA and NIPA request process I mentioned to gather enough critical information on how animals are used to have more transparency on what these labs are doing with a reporting system here in New Mexico. I mentioned earlier, a number of states have taken this approach of a transparency bill, and AIS is working towards that goal as well. Now, let me go to our highest profile issue area of the 3 for animals and science, and that is chimpanzees. Our work to free the remaining 26 chimpanzees at the APF facility. That number is down from 29 recently, which just goes to show you there is a reason why we are so hot on this right now. Thank you for changing that slide there. There's been a long-standing fight for APM going back over 2 decades on this, including that lawsuit in 2003. Some of you were around, you might recall that. But to the slide, 2023 was an interesting time for us on the legal front when it comes to the chimps. Here's Sadie Jacobs, I mentioned earlier, to explain what transpired.
Thank you, Jean. I am going to speak very briefly about the lawsuit that APNM has alongside the Humane Society of the US, the Humane Society Legislative Fund, as well as 3 individual plaintiffs. And this case is against the National Institutes of Health, and I will refer to it here as NIH. So I'll go ahead and give you a little bit of background info, and then I'll let you know where we are today. So in 2015, NIH determined that it would no longer fund invasive research on chimpanzees and that it would retire all federally owned chimpanzees remaining in laboratories to the National Chimpanzee Sanctuary, which is Chimp Haven, and that is located in Louisiana. Unfortunately, NIH reneged on its commitment to do so and announced in 2019 that all chimpanzees still located at Alamogordo Primate Facility, or APF, on Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico would remain at that facility for the rest of their lives. And that was in direct violation of the Chimp Act. So in 2021, APNM filed suit against NIH in order to see the remaining APF chimps moved to sanctuary. And as many of you know, in December of 2022, a district court judge in Maryland, Judge Grigsby, issued an order ruling that NIH is in fact in violation of the Chimp Act by not moving the now 26 chimps at APF to sanctuary, as Jean mentioned. So where are we now? Throughout 2023, we continued to work with our co-plaintiffs and the court and NIH, and we will have a more substantial update on the case for everyone very soon. I know that the legal system can be extremely slow, but I want to ensure everyone that we are continuing to do everything we can in this case for the chimps. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass it back to Jean. Thanks.
Thank you, Sadie. I really appreciate that. You know, folks, you should know Sadie was involved very heavily with this lawsuit all the way through, and her good work really got a good result for us on that case. So of note in 2023, thank you for the screen change for the APF chimps was this is a interesting bit here. The nomination and ascension of Dr. Monica Bertagnoli to director of the National Institutes of Health that Sadie mentioned. And of course, you know, they oversee APF. Both Sadie and I were quite active in that process, working closely with Senator Lujan's staff to get what's known as a question for the record, or QFR, as it's known on Capitol Hill, to Dr. Bertagnoli, asking her what was her view on chimps in sanctuary, in which Dr. Bertagnoli indicated her support for retiring the NIH chimps to sanctuary, something we are looking to leverage throughout 2024. She did this actually in writing, and we're very pleased with that result. And recently, APNM commissioned a statewide poll by PPP out of Raleigh, North Carolina, that shows overwhelming support for sanctuary of these chimps by New Mexicans. It was a big poll, over 500 people. It wasn't even close. People want to see this happen, and we will continue to pressure NIH to hold the director's own words to action. Now, for our members of Congress here in New Mexico, we also attended town halls for CD1 Representative Melody Stansbury and new CD2 Representative Gabe Vasquez, who committed his support for sanctuary to me at the August town hall that I attended when I asked him if he would in fact be supportive. That's important because he represents the district where APF is located. This is really the first time this has happened in a number of years. And also that all makes all 5 New Mexico members of our delegation in support of sanctuary. That's another first we aim to leverage. Finally, Lisa's appearance in the Arcus blog, you see pictured, that really cute picture there, also marked a renewed focus on local and national press coverage for the APF chimps after a bit of a quiet period. And that includes Newsweek magazine, who started a story on the chimps in the fall of 2023. And they're still reporting, and we'll see when that comes out. And we're actively looking to expand that national and international coverage once that Newsweek piece is published, and we'll leverage that as well. Now, looking forward to the rest of 2023 and beyond, we feel that all 3 areas for animals and science will continue to not just grow in scope, but more importantly, there's a real chance for systemic change in all 3 of these areas as well, and I'm very excited about that. Thank you all for listening, and now let me turn it back to Jessica Shelton and Government Affairs.
Thank you so much, Jean and Sadie, for that great review, and everyone else, Nina and Judy. So we wanted to, before ending this 2023 review, of course, acknowledge that actually the 2024 state legislative session has already finished. And so we thought it would make sense to just report a little bit on what those outcomes were. But of course, more information on this can be found on our website, in our emails, and we'll talk more about it when we do our 2024 review. But just real quickly, wanted to celebrate some progress and some wins. We did secure some additional funding again for the care program and co-sheltering work to help survivors of domestic violence and their animals get to safety, and whenever possible to stay together when they escape to safety. We also saw the state this year reinstate their state meat inspection program. Meat animal slaughter and meat inspection is managed by the federal government, but states have the ability to open up their own programs. And the legislation as introduced, we felt, first of all, plant-based options are always better. But when we looked at this bill, we also noticed that really it would have opened up a loophole that would have allowed a horse slaughter facility to open up in New Mexico. And as many of you know, that has been a long-standing problematic issue. We have a long history with that in New Mexico, fighting off horse slaughter from sinking its teeth into our state. So we were able to successfully amend that bill to close that loophole, require the New Mexico Livestock Board to officially deem horse meat adulterated, which means it cannot be produced or sold or traded in our state. So that is great news. And then throughout the course of our work in the last session, we did build a lot of new support and demand for animal welfare infrastructure. But next slide, Dorothée. By and large, there were still, for the most part, a lot of needs that were unmet this last session. And that wasn't unique to animal advocacy organizations. There were a lot of interests that got short shrift this year. You can see in that red box, I mean, the stats are staggering how little got done by our legislature. Almost 800 pieces of legislation introduced in the session. Only 72 substantive bills, policy and funding bills were passed. That is, I heard that was the least amount that's been passed in a given session in at least roughly the last 20 years. So on this slide, you'll see a couple of issues related to, again, helping people and animals in domestic violence situations. Creating a new trust fund in New Mexico, a permanent trust fund that would send earnings and build dollars that could go to our state's animal shelter infrastructure, animal control, training, supplies for families. That did not pass. And then next slide, final slide in the 2024 review, efforts to reform our state game commission. You all heard from Nina how really problematic the New Mexico Department of Game and Fish is when it comes to making science-based decisions and humane decisions in managing wildlife. Reforming that agency is important. That, again, did not pass. Other issues that came up, again, trying to address access to veterinary medicine, veterinary services, and allowing veterinarians more flexibility to practice in the state. Another bill that would have increased penalties for dog fighting and cockfighting, those also did not pass. So now is the time to redouble our efforts and rebuild our energy and our focus, and we're getting ready for the next legislative session. There's so much more work to do. So that's the quick sneak peek on 2024. And I'll hand it over back over to Lisa now. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Jess, and thank you everyone else who's presented tonight. What an amazing summary of the work that's supported by our generous donors. I'm going to end the presentation with a couple of things. One is just a look ahead, kind of tagging on to what Jessica just talked about. She covered the 2024 legislative session, but also just wanted to give you an idea that we're always planning ahead. We're not resting on the things that we've achieved, but we know there's so much to do when we look around the state to help make things better for animals. So coming up for 2024 and beyond, 2024, now that the session is over, we're using the balance of this year on the APV side to prepare for 2025's legislative session and beyond. So you'll see there's a variety of things here that we're planning on looking at. There's always a lot of laws we can plan for and bills that we can plan for trying to pass. And then there are others that just come up without any warning whatsoever. So these are the things that we're looking at to lead on in 2025. Building and strengthening, again, there's that phrase, state infrastructure for animals, that you're going to hear a lot from us over the next many years, including building momentum for a state Department of Animal Protection. Jessica mentioned the Animal Welfare Trust Fund. We want to work on that some more. reforming our state cruelty statute. Jean mentioned requiring data transparency for New Mexico labs, protecting and humanely managing free-roaming horses. That's something we've been trying to do for, maybe almost a decade. And that is a very tricky piece of legislation. We'll continue to make an effort to get that passed, and other bills that you can see mentioned here. And of course, we will be in support of the Family Violence Protection Act that is being led and driven by other organizations, and then working with our allies to modernize the state agency, Game and Fish, and the New Mexico Game Commission that manages wildlife. So there's always a lot to do. I also want to mention getting out the vote. 2024 is an election year for the legislature. So it's really important. Make sure that you're voting, your voice is heard on behalf of the things you care about, including animals. And also, this is just a push to make sure you know who your state senator and state representative are, and meet them for coffee. Ask them how they feel about animal issues. See if they have questions about these issues that matter to you. On the APNM side for Look Ahead, just a lot of continuation of what you heard today. I won't run through all of it, but suffice it to say that pretty much everything you heard about today, we're going to be continuing to build and strengthen throughout 2024, thanks to your support. And, this year has already seen some great accomplishments just in the first quarter. And we will just keep at it as long as we can, and as long as we have the resources to do so. Next slide, please. And speaking of resources, I wanted to make a plug here in the final moments of this before our Q&A. We're going to open this up for questions to everyone in a Q&A. But we are launching our Laws and Paws fundraiser for animal protection voters next week on March 28th up at our Santa Fe office. So if you aren't registered for that, we hope you'll come to that in-person event. It's going to be launching a multi-week long campaign to raise the funds that we need for animal protection voters to be able to achieve these kinds of outcomes that you care about. And so the theme this year is essentially the fights don't stop, and neither do we. There is just getting the bills passed, as you've seen, is not often enough. We're fighting to keep legislation like the new spay-neuter funding law. We're fighting to make sure that can be implemented and not challenged in court. We're going to be hopefully supporting the state if they need it for enforcing Roxy's law. So it's not enough to get it passed, and that's hard enough, but keeping it on the books, keeping the animals protected, moving forward, not backwards. This is what your support through Laws and Paws and animal protection voters helps us do. It really fuels our fire. That's what we need. So thank you again for staying with us all this time and listening to these achievements that you have a hand in making possible. And now we are going to open this up to questions. If anyone has questions that they'd like to put in the, I believe it's in the Q&A, and I'll turn it back over to, I believe, Dorte. And Dorte, I think you're muted.
We would like to open it up to questions on your end, and from what it looks like, I don't see any questions in the Q&A box. So, and there appears to be one now. And Marilyn Erickson says, thanks for the SB 57 update. Question: during the legislative process, the pet food industry insisted the bill should be a tax and not a fee, as APNM has designed it, and threatened a lawsuit stating that the bill is a tax. So now we have a lawsuit. Why did APNM design the bill as a fee and not a tax as the industry requested? And I guess maybe this goes to Jessica, and hopefully you can answer that.
Sure, I'm happy to. And hi, Marilyn. Thank you so much for the question. So when we were developing that legislation, we looked at what other states had already done. because we knew that we had a model that we could look at. And in those states, and still to this day, the pet food industry has not sued to overturn this law in any other state. They are picking on New Mexico. And, you know, the other thing that I would say, you know, just from my experience in working through that legislative process with the industry opposing the legislation, and in reading all of the lawsuit filings, you know, their complaint and all of their various motions and briefs associated with the lawsuit, the argument that, you know, it's a tax and not a fee, and therefore it was somehow improperly legislated, is one of like everything else plus the kitchen sink that they are throwing at this law in order to challenge it and overturn it. I feel very confident in saying that there's no slight tweak or fix that would have satisfied them where they'd be okay with it. The point is that this industry group, the Pet Food Institute, represents all of these different pet food manufacturers. And because of this law, they are now paying additional money when they register their products in the state, and that money goes to spay neuter. Quite frankly, their clients, the pet food manufacturers, don't want to pay more money. They would rather keep that for their own profits. So, you know, we can all have our own feelings about what their position is on that. But the truth is that it really doesn't matter whether it had been enacted in the tax code versus enacted in the commercial pet food part of the statute, just like it had been with every other state. The point is that they don't want to pay more money in order to fund spay neuter in New Mexico. So, you know, there's a lot of different arguments that they're throwing at it. You know, I could probably at this point give like a 3-hour seminar about why I think their arguments are wrong and weak and they should lose and the law should stand, but we'll have to delay that, I guess, for next time. But hopefully that answers your question, Marilyn, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Jessica. It looks like we have another question, and this one is from Claudette. And Claudette is asking, how can we get more information before the session what APNM will be supporting? It will help us better advocate, to be better advocates if those were sent to all of us who want to be active if we got the same handout the legislators receive. And I guess that goes to you too, Jessica.
Sure. Hi, Claudette. It's good to see you here. Yeah. So, and I recognize, Claudette, that you and I had been in touch before the 2024 legislative session. This legislative session and the short sessions that happen during the even numbered years in New Mexico, because our sessions are different depending on whether it's an even numbered year or an odd numbered year. So this year it was a short session in an even numbered year, and that means that the session is constitutionally limited in what legislators can consider and actually move forward to pass into law. And so primarily the focus of the legislative work during these short sessions is looking at budget issues, looking at additional funding. So a lot of that stuff relies more on our team having relationships with legislators to talk to them about the various programs and services and entities across the state that deserve more state funding. And there really weren't a lot of policy issues that we could work on. So what I mentioned in the 2024 sneak peek, some of that stuff, was stuff that came from the individual legislator, and we learned about it once it was filed. So we didn't have a heads up per se. There were other pieces of legislation that were introduced, but because they weren't budget issues and the governor didn't provide a message for that issue, it wasn't germane and it never moved forward. We did dedicate a lot of time to the Animal Welfare Trust Fund idea, which was a brand new idea, actually conceived after having a positive conversation with someone from the governor's office in January. So that was something where it was like, We had some potential key interest and buy-in after floating it also with a couple of state legislators, and moved quickly to draft the bill so that we could at least have that discussion during the session. So unfortunately, with this specific legislative session in 2024, there just was not a lot of opportunity to have more lead up time and more communication with our supporters about what was going on, just because of the nature of these short sessions. That will be different when we get into the long session and go into looking at the 2025 session. Any legislative policy bill can be considered and move through the legislative process. There is not that state constitutional limit. And so that gives our team more time and more capability to tell you ahead of time exactly what we're working on and how everyone can get involved to help. So thank you, Claudette. Love your commitment to these issues. And I know that you have a lot to bring to it. And we're really excited to work more with you as we are gearing up for the next session.
Thank you so much, Jessica, and thanks, Claudette, for asking. It looks like there are no open questions at the moment, and maybe that means that we helped answer them all and provide you with the information you were looking for. So I can give it another minute or two to allow for anybody else who may still have a question. It looks like in the chat we actually have something here. Sharon Bice says, I would love for an update to be made more frequently regarding SB 57 and the supporters of SB 57 Facebook page to be active again, so the public can be informed and updated. No one seems to understand the current issues. Thanks for all you guys do. So with that, I would like to thank Jessica and Lisa and my other fellow staff members for sharing such amazing information about the work done in 2023 and giving everyone an update on the plans for this year. We appreciate your interest, sticking with us for 2 long hours almost, and great questions. We've recorded the meeting and we'll make the recording available to everyone who registered by sending you a link via an email. And with that, I'd like to just thank you for taking the time to be here with us today. We appreciate you and all you do for animals in New Mexico. And have a great evening and a wonderful weekend. Thank you.